Okay, so the next two books I want to talk about are by Zaires, and I have to say at the end of book 2 I've never felt so much rage and so much anger towards a book ever before. Thank you for joining me today for my April reading wrap up. I'm going to get stuck straight in and kick off with the stats for the month. So in total I read 16 books. That came to 6,128 pages, which was an average of 204 pages per day. So that's slightly higher than my normal average, which usually comes in around 150, 160 pages per month. So I had a great reading month in April. In terms of how I read the books, 2 of them were actually ARCs, 3 were audiobooks, 4 ebooks, and then 7 Kindle Unlimited. From a star rating perspective, I had 4 3.5 stars, 9 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 2 5-star reads this month as well. And then from a subgenre perspective, pretty compact reading month this month. I had 1 contemporary, 3 dark romances, 8 mafia romances, 3 paranormal, and 1 sports romance as well. So at the very end of my March reading wrap up, I reviewed Blood of My Monster by Rina, which was book 1 in her monster trilogy, following the same couple, Kirill and Sasha. So right at the start of this month, I finished Lies of My Monster and Heart of My Monster, which is books 2 and 3 in that trilogy. Now this trilogy is a dark mafia romance trilogy. The hero is Bratva, so he's a Russian hero. This book actually starts in Russia, so we have the book set both in Russia and in New York as well, because right at the start of this trilogy, our main hero, he is in the Russian armed forces. He has basically fallen out with his father. He doesn't like the way that he kind of rules his mafia family, and so he's gone to Russia to basically spend some time in the army there, really to get away from his father. But after 10 years, throughout the events of book 1, Kirill is forced to go back to New York. So this book, like I said, is set in both Russia and in New York City as well. Our heroine in this series is Sasha, and for most of the book she actually is posing as a man, because she has kind of infiltrated the armed forces, if you like, posing as a male soldier, and is kind of seeking revenge for something that happened to her family. And it's when she's in the armed forces that she first meets Kirill, and she kind of joins his special forces unit, of which he is the leader. And then when he's called back to New York to head up the Russian mafia over there, she actually goes back with him and is one of his bodyguards. Of course, Kirill, our hero, knows pretty much straight away that Sasha is in fact a woman. However, she does manage to fool most other people, and this is the romance between Sasha and Kirill. Now, of course, because this is a trilogy, both books 1 and 2 do end on cliffhangers. So at the end of book 1, we're in this state basically where Kirill has had to go back to New York and Sasha has followed him as his bodyguard. But we also start to learn a little bit more about Sasha, what she's doing there, what happened to her family, and why she's trying to seek revenge. What we learn is that Kirill's father had something to do with the massacre of her entire family, apart from 3 family members, which is her grandma, her uncle, and her nephew as well. The other family member that's kind of at large, as it were, is her brother. Everyone believes that he's dead, and she has not seen him since the massacre happened, yet she kind of holds out hope that maybe he is still alive somewhere out there. So we know that she has infiltrated the armed forces, like I say, and then followed Kirill to New York to find out a little bit more about what happened, and she's kind of tracked it down to Kirill's father. There's loads of other kind of plot points and intrigue in here. There's lots going on with his family members. He's got a sister and brother, and also kind of a mother who really dislikes Kirill, and they don't have a great relationship at all, and he's always been really kind of like hurt by the fact that his own mother doesn't love him. And as we go through this trilogy, we start to find out a little bit more about why that is. So then, like I said, the first book that I read in the month of April was Lies of My Monster. That is book 2 in the trilogy, and this is kind of set in New York. Like I say, Kirill is now taken over of the head of this Bratva, and Sasha is there as his bodyguard. But they obviously, it is their romance, so they obviously are having a physical relationship with each other while keeping her identity secret. Now, Kirill is kind of very possessive, obsessed kind of hero, as all Rina Kent's heroes are, and he really wants to understand Sasha's secrets. He knows that she's keeping secrets from him. He doesn't 100% understand why she is posing as a man, but he respects her wish to do so. But he starts to become very suspicious of what she's there to do, and this really kind of puts up a blocker between them and their relationship. It's really hard for them to move on, and of course she's dealing with her own sense of guilt as well. She kind of doesn't want to betray her own family, and she wants to find out more and seek revenge for what's happened, but over time she's falling more and more in love with Kirill and doesn't kind of want to leave him or do anything wrong. So the second book again ends on quite a cliffhanger, where actually Kirill believes that Sasha has died. And in book 3 then, which is Heart of My Monster, he goes very much into a bit of a tailspin because he's very much grieving for Sasha. He really truly believes that she has passed away, and he's kind of like heartbroken and filled with remorse over what happened. And of course he is in a position as the Pacan of this Bratva family to, you know, deal out a lot of destruction and take out his grief and anger on all of the people around him. Of course, in book 3 we then realise that Sasha has not passed away. Clearly this is a romance, they do get their HEA, and it's dealing with the consequences of what happens when Kirill finds out that she is in fact alive, and what the lengths he'll go to make sure they kind of end up together. Now of course loads of people absolutely love this trilogy. It comes highly recommended. It's been on my TBR for a while, and I actually read book 1, Blood of My Monster, because it had been recommended by a viewer, and of course I enjoyed it enough that I carried on with the series and read books 2 and 3 as well. As I said kind of at the end of my last read and wrap up video, I didn't love book 1. It was okay, but I found it was really kind of like drawn out in places. It was really laying the foundations of the rest of the story, and so overall I rated it 4 stars. But books 2 and 3 definitely picked up. So book 2 in the series, Lies of My Monster, I actually rated 4 stars, and it was 3.5 on the spy scale. And then the third book in the trilogy, Heart of My Monster, I rated 4.5 stars and rated it 4 on the spy scale. So it definitely did improve as the series went on. I really enjoyed the conclusion of book 3. So after that I picked up Mountain Boss by S.J. Tilley, which was a new release in the month of March. So I was really keen to read this one. I'd only ever read S.J. Tilley's Mafia series before, so this is the first book of hers that I'd read that was not Mafia. And so this is a contemporary kind of small town romance which is set in a place called Black Mountain, and we were following Courtney and Sterling. This is an age gap romance, close proximity, a very obsessed hero. It's a workplace romance as well, and definitely had touch her and die vibes in this one as well. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Erin Mallin and Connor Craze, so really great audiobook to listen to as well. And overall I rated it 4 stars and gave it 3 on the spy scale. So I did enjoy this one. I didn't love it as much as her Mafia series, but definitely S.J. Tilley writes a certain type of hero, and he was completely bonkers, obsessed with our heroine, and would do anything for her, and I absolutely love those types of heroes, so definitely enjoyed the read of this one. So Sterling is our mountain man. In fact, he's our mountain boss. He owns his own business, and essentially he owns some cabins on a mountainside, and people come and stay there, and him and his team take these people out hiking, fishing, hunting, that sort of thing on his property. So it's kind of a bit of a resort style place to go, a cross between sort of camping and glamping, if you like, and he has a small number of people working for him. Now at the start of this book he's recently lost his maintenance man, so he's recruiting for a new maintenance person, and it's Courtney who gets employed. The thing is, Sterling thinks that he's employed a man because on the paperwork it says court, and he's automatically assumed that this is a man. And so when Courtney turns up and he realizes that he's employed a woman, he isn't too happy about this, and in fact he's pretty much a jerk at the start of this book because he does whatever he can to try and get rid of Courtney so that she will kind of give up her job and leave. But the main reason he's such a jerk to her is because he's actually really attracted to her, and he thinks having a woman around is going to be too much of a distraction distraction. And we also find out that he's a bit of a damaged hero as well, because a past relationship didn't work out too well for him, and he's kind of therefore a little bit afraid to fall in love again and trust another woman in his life. And so this is kind of the main reason really why he is so mean to Courtney at first, but over time he realises his mistake and then does kind of a lot of grovelling and a lot of really, really nice things for our heroine to really make up for how he acted right at the start of this book. There's some really, really cute things in this book, not least because Courtney is the sort of character that, you know, doesn't come from very much. She's kind of a bit of estranged from her mother. She is desperate for this job and needs somewhere to stay, so she's determined to stick it out and give it a go. And she doesn't really have many friends as a result, and so everywhere she goes, she takes her cactus with her, and she's got this cactus who's kind of her friend, and she talks to this cactus and kind of dresses up in little outfits and stuff as well, which I thought was really, really cute. Okay, so the next two books I'm going to talk about are both by Anna Zaires, and I have to say that I've never been angrier after reading a book than I was after reading the second book that I'm going to be talking about. I was absolutely livid. So the book that I picked up, first of all, was Terrible Beauty by Anna Zaires. This is book 1 in the Molotov Betrothal series, and it's a mafia series. In fact, it's a Russian mafia tale. This is kind of an arranged marriage, captive, close/forced proximity. There's a kidnapping in here, an obsessed hero, stalking, toucher and die vibes, basically all of the red flags that we expect from an Anna Zaires hero, in fact any kind of dark mafia hero. This was actually a viewer recommendation. It was one that I pulled from the jar, and it was recommended by Jessica Brockington. So Jessica, thank you so much for the recommendation. It's not your fault at all that I was so angry about this book. So in this one we're following Elena and Alexei. In fact, both books that I'm going to be talking about feature this couple because it is a continuation of their romance. Alexei is a Bratva hero. At the very start of this book, he is kind of heir to the Bratva family. His father obviously is currently in charge. Now his family is actually rivals with Elena's family, but they're trying to kind of come to a bit of a compromise to smooth things over. And so when Elena is just a teenager, she is actually arranged in marriage to Alexei, and of course what they tell her then is that you're going to be arranged in marriage. This is good for both our families and it will cement a union between us, so we'll no longer be enemies. Obviously Alexei is going to wait until Elena turns 18 before he kind of takes her as his bride. So Elena knows for a number of years that she's arranged in marriage to Alexei. Now she really, really doesn't want this marriage. She really is fearful of Alexei. She really doesn't like him. But over the years they have a number of encounters together, and each encounter leaves Elena feeling more and more confused, because obviously she's going to be very attracted to him but hate him in equal measure. Alexei though is absolutely obsessed with her and really, really wants to marry her. At the very start of this book though, Alexei and Elena are actually older, and Alexei has come to claim his prize. He's come to claim his bride. And so the very first scene of this book is him coming along to kidnap her, and he takes her captive and he keeps her trapped on his yacht as it floats about in the Pacific Ocean. Then the rest of this book really is flashbacks from when they were first arranged in marriage and what has happened to them over the years. So we kind of get these chapters where we see what happened to them at different ages as we lead up to the point in which Alexei is now being forced to kidnap her. So over time more and more is revealed. Now I really didn't like this style of storytelling at all. I would have much preferred if book 1 was just a literal timeline of events from when they first got arranged in marriage up to present day. But because it starts with the kidnapping, what I'm really, really wanting here is the relationship between them now that he's kidnapped her, and what's going to happen now she's his captive. But we only see really, really small snippets of them as a couple in current times. The rest of it, like I say, is whole chapters of flashbacks. And so this really kind of frustrated me quite a lot, because I was like, I just want to know, kind of, I get that they've got a history, I get that Alexei's obsessed with her, but I just want to get to the good stuff of how he is going to kind of like win her over now that she is his captive. So overall, like I say, I wasn't a big fan of the flashbacks in this one, but I did rate it 3.5 stars, and it was 3 on the spy scale. But the 3.5 stars was generous so that I could round it up to 4, I will say. However, it was only a really short book. It was 286 pages, and because there was a second part to this book, I felt really compelled to go on and read the second part, because by the time we get to the end of book 1, obviously there's a bit of a cliffhanger, and we're right now up to present day. So I was like, right, this is the good stuff now. This is the bit that I really want to read. How is he going to win her over? So of course then I dive straight into Beautiful Chains, which is book 2 in the Molotov betrothal series. And indeed this is now right up to present time, and you know, Alexei is doing everything he can to win our heroine over. Of course she's still kind of filled with kind of like rage. She really doesn't want to be his captive. She doesn't want to be arranged in marriage to him. She really is resentful of the fact that he's kidnapped her and taken her away from her family. But he is obviously not having any of it. But he does some really, really sweet things while she's in his captivity. And slowly and surely he starts to win her round. So this is all sounding really good, right? So why was I so angry by the time I got to the end of this book? Well, this turns out that this was not a duet as I believed it to be. I thought this was just going to be 2 books because there is no third book listed at all. When I got to the end of this second book, this ended on an absolutely horrendous cliffhanger. What happens to these characters and how this book ends is absolutely awful. And we are left literally on this cliffhanger. So we definitely are left in a state where there is a book 3 that is due to come out for this couple, but it's not here yet. And it's not been here yet for a couple of years. So of course I was like absolutely distraught. And like I say, I was so filled with rage. One, because I had no idea if this was going to be a trilogy. I genuinely thought this was a duet, only because there was no mention of it at all on Amazon, and there was no kind of warning that said this ends on a cliffhanger or this is part of a trilogy. And maybe it was my mistake for not doing a little bit more research on this, because anyone who has been following Anna Zaires closely will probably know that she was always meaning to bring out a third book in the series, but I literally was not expecting it at all. So I was very upset by how this ended, and also knowing that there was no third book available for me to read. Now, after I've done a little bit of research on this, looking at Anna Zaires' Instagram feed as well, she does intend to write book 3. She's had a bit of a writing block with writing it. She says it's going to be quite an emotional write for her, so she has been struggling to kind of finish it, and in the meantime she's written a couple of other books in between, but she is promising that she will get around to finishing this one and hopefully will have something this year. I would say that I much prefer book 2 over book 1. Like I said, I wasn't a massive fan of the flashbacks. I really just wanted to get to the good stuff of their relationship, so I did enjoy book 2 a lot more. But still, like I say, without giving anything away at all, book 2 was much more emotional. It was quite difficult to read by the end, and it does end on a very difficult cliffhanger. So overall I rated this second book 4 stars. It was 3.5 on the spy scale, and I am really, really looking forward to reading book 3, and hopefully that will all work out for this couple in the end. Okay, so the next book I picked up was Sever Ties by Montana Fyre. This is book 1 in the Tainted Love series. It's a dark stalker romance between Tommy and Clara. Now, I would also say this is mafia adjacent, because Tommy, our hero in this one, is actually an enforcer for a mafia family which have their own kind of series. So this is a spin-off series to the Frost Industries series that this author has done. I'm definitely intrigued to read more, not only in this series but also that series as well. And Clara, our heroine, she's actually the personal assistant of one of the heroines from the other series as well. So although she is a personal assistant, she is on the kind of the legal side of the business, if you like, and Tommy is like I say, on the illegal part of the business. Now, Tommy and Clara first meet in the Frost Industries series because something happens in that series where Clara needs to be rescued, and Tommy is the one to kind of rescue her. After that incident, Tommy becomes absolutely obsessed with our heroine Clara, and then he starts to stalk her. So this book is their story. It takes place 6 months after he's first started to stalk her. So this kind of starts 6 months after he rescued her in that other series. He's been quietly stalking her, content to just watch her from the sidelines, and he's not stalking her in a kind of really creepy way, but he just really feels compelled to make sure that she's okay. So it started off with him just checking in on her remotely, and then became this obsession where he had to check in on her kind of every single day, but kind of kept himself to the shadows. But they kind of bump into each other again when our heroine Clara, she is trying to head to work. She's walking down the street and she nearly gets hit by a car, and Tommy is obviously watching. He sees what's going to happen and he saves her from being run over by a car, and so they are then kind of like brought back together, and Tommy is now unable to kind of stay away from her, and he's gonna make sure that he is more directly in her path going forward. What we also learn though is Clara is hiding secrets of her own, because she is actually a woman on the run. She's hidden her identity because she's actually the daughter of a kind of a criminal, and he used to use her when she was a child to do criminal activity. She got herself into quite a predicament, and in the end she managed to escape her father and run away. But he has constantly been trying to look for her, bring her back into the fold, and eventually in this book her past is going to come back to haunt her, and Tommy is going to have to step in and rescue her from her past. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. We'll definitely be reading more in this series and from this author. I rated it 4 stars, and it was also 4 on the spy scale. Tommy did like to be quite dominant in the bedroom, and also there was some blood play in this one as well. So next up I read The Brit by Jodi Ellen Malpas, and this is book 1 in her Unlawful Men series. This is another mafia romance. Now this one had been on my TBR for absolutely ever. I really wanted to read it, and I've been putting it off for some time, and I finally decided I was going to pick this one up, and I was so glad that I did, and it was one of my 5-star reads for the month. It was really good. However, what I will say about this one, which I've said before because I recently talked about this book in a previous video, but it is not fun to read. So normally I like a really fun, crazy, over the top kind of mafia story. This one was much more serious. This one had a lot of really kind of like dark content. It was very emotional. The characters were really deep in this one, so it was absolutely brilliant writing. No hesitation from me to give this one a 5-star, but like I say, I didn't necessarily have fun reading this one. This was quite a serious read, and really kind of like felt very powerful and very emotional to read as well. So this one is an age gap, kept captive, hidden identity, some PTSD and trauma in here for our characters, a scarred hero and heroine, and definitely toucher and die vibes. And we're all following Danny and Rose. So right at the start of this book we get a chapter from Danny's point of view and one from Rose's point of view, and we get a glimpse into their childhood and just how traumatized both of these characters truly are. Danny came from a very poor household. His mother left him when he was a young boy, and he was left to be raised by his stepfather, and his stepfather was not kind to him at all. He was very abusive, and Danny suffered quite severely at the hands of his stepfather. He was also bullied quite a lot with the other kids in the neighbourhood, especially the rich kids, because, you know, he was always in sort of tatty clothes. He was always a little bit dirty and scavenging for food and that sort of thing. Now, his life is completely turned around though when he is in an alley, and a man runs into the alley and he's chased by this car, and when the car stops, a man gets out who's in a very expensive suit, very expensive shoes, and this guy is the head of a mafia family. He kind of has chased down this guy that's running through the alley and kills him, and Danny is kind of there to witness this crime. But also in the alley at the time is these kids that are picking on Danny, and so when the mafia guy sees this, he defends Danny in front of these kids. He actually ends up unaliving his stepfather, and then takes Danny with him back to the United States and raises him as his heir, and trains him to basically be a mafia man. And so Danny is absolutely devoted and loves his father, you know, his new father. So like I say, we see then Danny's past as a child. We understand that he's been through this very traumatic experience, and we understand the loyalty he feels to this head of this mafia family. And then this mafia man kind of ends up passing away, and Danny inherits then this mafia family, so he is now the boss. Meanwhile then, Rose has a equally traumatic tale, because she was an orphan, she ended up being in foster care, and then she was lured away to this place where she was actually entered into kind of a sex trafficking ring, if you like. But what they were actually doing was even worse than that, because they were basically breeding babies to sell on the black market. At the very start, we see her very heavily pregnant, running away from some very bad men in an attempt to save her baby. Of course, they're going to catch up with her. Her baby is going to be taken away from her, but she actually has a very difficult birth, and as a result she's left sterile. She can't have any more children, and so she's pretty useless to this then breeding program. And so she gets sold to this man called Knox and used because she is still extremely beautiful, and he thinks, actually, I can use her for nefarious purposes and get her to seduce men, get secrets out of them, and you know, I can still make her work for me even if she's not actually able to have kids. So like I say, she is also very traumatized by what's happened to her. And so really just in the first couple of chapters of this book, we've then fully understand where Danny is coming from, we fully understand where Rose is coming from, and then finally these two meet, and Danny gets the opportunity to take her captive and uses her as leverage against one of his enemies. But of course, when she ends up being his captive, he starts to see himself in her and realise that they are very similar in terms of the trauma that they've been through, and as a result they kind of like really form this kind of relationship and this bond between them and grow very close, and kind of the story goes from there. That's all I'm going to say about this one, because I think it is worth reading. There is quite a good plot to this one, and we obviously, as we read more, we start to uncover what is actually going on, because there's more to this story than actually meets the eye, and how everyone is kind of connected together. So like I say, really love this one. Thought it was brilliant writing, rated it 5 stars, and it was 3.5 on the spy scale. But like I said, don't go into this one thinking it's going to be a fun mafia action-packed romance. This has much more serious themes, and was actually quite emotional to read. So check your trigger warnings when you pick this one up. Next up, I read Kiss of a Demon by Kresley, and this is book 7 in the Immortals After Dark series. So this one is a paranormal romance. If you've watched my wrap-up videos before, or any of my TBRs this year, then you'll know that I am doing the Immortals After Dark read-along that is being hosted by Amber from Amber Reads Romance. Every month this year we are going to be picking up 2 books from this series, so by the end of the year we'll hopefully have finished all of them in the series. So of course in the month of April it was time for me to read books 7 and 8. So this one, like I say, is book 7, and in it we're following Rydstrom, who is the true king of the rage demons, but unfortunately he lost his throne about 400 years ago to this evil sorcerer, and ever since then he's been desperate to overthrow this sorcerer and get his kingdom back. And the heroine in this one is Sabine, and she is a sorcerer. In fact, she is the queen of illusions, and she is the half-sister of this sorcerer who's taken over Rydstrom's kingdom. So on paper they should absolutely be mortal enemies, and in fact they are to start with. This becomes a captor situation, enemies to lovers, fated mates, forced proximity, an obsessed hero, also a scarred hero, and a virgin heroine as well. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was narrated, as they all are, by Robert Petkoff, so I would highly recommend the audiobooks for these. So we've got to know Rydstrom pretty well up to this particular book, and we know that he and his brother Cadian have been, like I say, trying to get Rydstrom's kingdom back for some time. And in the previous book, book 6, Cadian actually got the opportunity to retrieve this sword that is supposed to be able to kill this sorcerer, because this sorcerer is a very bad guy indeed, and he is supposed to be unkillable. And so his name is Omor the Undying, because he's allegedly unable to be killed, so he's ever living. But they've heard about this sword that can actually unalive him, and so Cadian now has this, and we saw that he finally delivers it to Rydstrom in the previous book. Still, we also know that Rydstrom was tricked and lured by this beautiful sorceress and then kept captive. So it's actually Sabine who holds Rydstrom captive, and so we think at first that Sabine is doing this to help her half-brother Omort, but we actually learn she's got her own reasons for trapping Rydstrom. But through the captivity, obviously Rydstrom and Sabine are going to fight. They're going to be at odds with each other. Rydstrom's going to obviously try and escape, and when he finally does get help because somebody helps him, a character that I've had my eye on because I can't wait to get to his book later. He does get help to escape, and then the tables are turned, of course, because he is now going to have Sabine as captive, and he's going to take her back to where he actually lives in New Orleans, and then try and enact his plan to unalive her half brother, and so their romance goes from there. I really enjoyed this one, rated it 4 stars, and it was 3.5 on the spy scale. Now, while none of these books or any of these stories have blown me away so far, they've all kind of been around the 4-star mark. I do really enjoy this world, I enjoy these characters, and I really love seeing the whole cast of characters that's really coming together, and we're starting to get to know them really well, and I think that makes for an interesting read as well, not just the individual romances. After that, I went straight on to read Deep Kiss of Winter, and this is book 8 in the Immortals After Dark series. This one was actually quite hard for me to get hold of because it was actually originally written as part of a collaboration with another author. It is a novella length story that was part of another book where this other author also wrote a novella length story in there together. That also means that in the UK I couldn't get the audiobook, so there is no audiobook available for me to download this, but I think in the US you can get an audiobook for this, for just this story. But for me in the UK I couldn't find it anywhere, and I ended up having to buy this ebook separately. It wasn't on KU or anything. So in this one we were actually following Murdoch and Daniela, and Murdoch is one of our vampire brothers, and so he was the last vampire brother to actually get a romance, so I was really happy to see him finally get his fated mate, because this is a close proximity fated mates tale. It's an obsessed hero, possessive hero, reverse age gap, because Daniela is actually older than him, shockingly, even though he's a vampire who is a couple of 100 years old. It's a virgin heroine, woman in charge, and a woman on the run as well. So as I said, Murdoch is a vampire, and one night when he's helping his brother track down Mist, who is his fated mate, he happens to run into Daniela. And Daniela is part Valkyrie but also part Ice Fae. And so Daniela is many hundreds of years old, but she's never been touched. She's still a virgin because of the fact she's an Ice Fae. She is completely cold at all times. If anyone touches her, it's too warm for her. She is in a severe amount of pain, and of course anyone she touches obviously is the reverse, and they get very frosty very fast. And so she is the sort of person that, you know, is actually on the run, like I say, because she's half Valkyrie, half Ice Fae. She's also heir to the throne, but her mother was unalived by somebody who kind of like tried to overthrow her and take control. And so now this guy who is basically head of the Ice Fae, he keeps sending men after her to kill her because he's afraid that at any point she's going to come and reclaim her throne. Of course, Daniela doesn't want anything to do with it. She's happy to just live with the Valkyrie, but she's constantly on the run, like I say, because these people are constantly after her. And so this is how Murdoch actually meets her, because he spots Daniela. She's being chased by these Ice Fae, and he goes to try and follow her but also rescue her, and their relationship starts from there. Now, he recognises her as his mate straight away, but Murdoch is very resistant to it, whereas the other vampires we've seen, they're like, great, I found my fated mate, my bride, and they've become absolutely obsessed with getting them. Murdoch's reaction is actually very different. He really doesn't want a bride. He finds this very inconvenient, and he really tries to fight against it. Meanwhile, Daniela is actually desperate for someone to love her, and is actually really upset that he doesn't want anything to do with her and doesn't want her to be his bride. And so she kind of takes a little bit of umbrage to this, because she's desperate, like I said, to have someone, because she's been so lonely and so starved of touch her whole life. When Murdoch finally gets over himself, obviously he's going to have some wooing to do. He's going to have to try and, you know, get Daniela to trust him again, but also they're going to have to figure out a way where they're actually going to be able to touch each other, because they're still in a bit of a predicament where he can't touch her. So how are they going to make this relationship work physically? And so that is a conundrum which only Kresley Cole can fix for us. Overall, again, I did enjoy this one, 4 stars, and it was 3 on the spy scale when they finally figured out how they were going to have a physical relationship with each other. Next up then, I read this book here, which is A Code of Nights and Deception by Eliza Hampstead. This is the Swords of Time book 1. This is going to be a duet, so this one does end on a cliffhanger, and this is an author that I'm actually a beta reader for, and so I actually beta read this book first of all towards the end of last year. I didn't give it a rating at the time because at the time it was 900 pages long. There was a lot of chapters and a lot of words that the author needed to cut from this book, and so I didn't think it would be fair to rate it until it was kind of in its finished form, and so it was finally finished in April. Now I've got several copies of this book because, as well as being a beta reader, Eliza was very kind to send me an ARC copy of this book as well, and this physical copy as soon as the book was available. So she sent this to me as a thank you for being a beta reader, and I actually then downloaded it as Kindle Unlimited and read it because I didn't have time to read it before it came out like a traditional ARC to do a review on it. So I decided I was going to download it on KU just to help the author out when I read it. So this one is a dark time travel romance. The author has basically said it's Outlander meets Black Mirror. I can't actually speak for that because I haven't read either Outlander and I haven't watched Black Mirror either, but I'll take her word for that one. And this is a captive, forced proximity, hidden identity with very dark themes. So I would definitely check the trigger warnings for this one before you pick it up. Now the main couple we're following in here is Sophia and Henry, and when this book starts we are in kind of present day, and this one is actually set in Warwick Castle in Warwick. It's actually not too far from where I live, just about a 14-minute drive, and I know this castle very, very well. It is incredibly well preserved castle, and when you go there you can go out as a family day. You can, you know, walk the grounds, you could do a tour of inside of the castle, you can go up to the battlements. There was a lot of land around this castle as well, and they kind of do jousting and they do falconry and teach kids how to do archery, that sort of thing. So it was a really sort of fun medieval day out if you're ever in the UK and want to visit Warwick Castle. And so our heroine in this one, Sophia, finds herself on such an activity. She has travelled with her family to the UK. She is having a lovely day out at Warwick Castle. She is with her husband and her son, and as she's walking through kind of the grounds of this castle, suddenly she is transported back to the 1400s, straight into medieval times, and she has no idea how she got there or how she's going to find her way home. Of course, she's going to do what she can to find a way back to present times, but she's also trying to figure out what's going on. Has she somehow gone through some weird time portal? Is she back in time? Is this kind of a scenario where actually actors are pretending that this is medieval times? But she kind of knows that while she's trying to figure it out, she also needs to attempt to blend in, because these actors, if they are indeed actors, are taking things very, very seriously, and so she starts to kind of have to integrate herself into this medieval life. Now, it happens in a time in history where there is quite a lot of tax on Warwick Castle, and so she decides then that she's going to disguise herself as a boy so that she can learn sword fighting, and it's actually our hero Henry who is actually our knight, and he is basically training up the villagers and everything, all of the young boys in the village, to be sword fighters and to learn how to fight. And so she joins this kind of group of people who are doing that. Henry knows pretty quickly that she is in fact a woman, but he is you know, very attracted to her, and he's very intrigued by her, so he kind of lets her get away with this. And of course they're going to spend more time together, they're going to be in close proximity together, and they're going to form a bit of a relationship. But things are tricky, right? Because for two reasons. One, she's actually married, she's got a son, so there is some cheating in this one, so just be aware of that, because technically she is still married even though she is now transported into the past. And Henry is actually betrothed to another woman, so again the relationship for him is a little bit taboo as well. But of course they're not going to be able to stay away from each other. But there is more to this than meets the eye. Eliza Hampstead does lay us some clues, and as we go through the book we start to then figure out exactly what is going on and how Sophia finds herself in this situation. Now, like I said at the beginning, this one is a duet, so this one does end on a cliffhanger. We don't have all of the answers to our questions yet, but we definitely know quite a lot about what's going on by the time we reach the end of this. Now overall I rated this one 3.5 stars. It's 3 on the spice scale as well. Next up I picked up Dance of Ruin by Jagger, which is book 2 in the Darkest Dance series. I picked this one up as an arc and it continues this series and I've been really enjoying it so far. It's an Italian mafia romance, this particular one, between a ballet dancer who is called Naomi and Nico, who is part of the mafia family. In fact, he's brothers to Carmine, who is the hero from book 1. Now, Nico and Carmine are also part of a secret society called the Black Court, and Nico is the character who wears the Raven mask, and we're starting to figure out who all of the men in the masks are. But like I said, this is the Raven story, who is and the Raven mask is worn by Nico. So technically Nico and Naomi are kind of enemies. So this is an enemies to lovers tale, forced proximity. There's non-con, dub-con in here. It's an obsessed hero, over the top, very possessive. Like I say, it is a secret society. They do enter into a sex deal. He has touch her and die vibes, and we've got a virgin heroine in this one as well. So like I say, Nico is part of this mafia family. He is brothers to Carmine. Now Carmine was a complete psychopath, Nico not so much, but still he is quite unhinged. Meanwhile, Naomi is a ballet dancer, so we've seen that there's this kind of ballet school. Quite a lot of the female characters in this series are part of this ballet school, and Naomi is a ballet dancer, and she is in fact the lead ballet dancer in the upcoming production of Swan Lake. So she is very good ballet dancer. Naomi has secretly had a crush on Nico for a while because she knows him through, you know, her ballet friend, because one of her ballet friends is Nico's sister, and so she knows him from that. At the start of this book, their paths actually cross a little bit more directly, because during a party Naomi goes up to the rooftop, and when she goes to the rooftop she overhears a conversation with Nico and another man, who then gets pushed from the roof. So essentially she witnesses Nico unaliving this man by pushing him from this roof. Nico then sees her and he kind of really intimidates her, making sure that obviously she isn't going to tell anyone what she's seen, and he's content to leave it at that. But then there's an attack on Nico's family, where his younger sister, in fact Naomi's friend, is caught in a car bombing. She is rescued just in time by her husband, taken to the hospital where she does recover, but Nico and his family obviously don't take too kindly to the fact that someone tried to bomb the family, and also that his younger sister got injured. Nico obviously then with his family is going to try and figure out exactly who did this, and he kind of gets led to Naomi's father, because Naomi's father is a very ambitious politician. He's in bed with very bad guys, and they learn that he has somehow done a deal with the syndicate, and the syndicate is a kind of rival mafia group who are also trying to take down the Black Court, and they have somehow colluded with this politician, Naomi's father, to destroy Nico's family. And so he can't actually touch Naomi's father because he is actually part of the White House cabinet, and so he decides he's going to take out revenge on Naomi directly. And so he forces her then into this kind of sex deal. She becomes his sex slave, really, at his beck and call, and he basically says he's going to use and abuse her for about 6 months until he's satisfied he's got full revenge against her father. And the idea is that he's going to attempt to break her, and that's one way that he can get back at the father. Of course, once they enter into this relationship, the lines are going to become very blurred, and Nico and Naomi are going to start to develop feelings for one another. So I really enjoyed this one, rated it 4 stars. It was 4 on the spice scale. Next up, I read Hunger in His Blood by Zoey Draven. This is book 3 in her Brides of the Kylor series. So this is a paranormal / sci-fi romance. It was very angsty, this one. They're in close proximity, fated mates. It was another sex deal, surprise baby, and a virgin heroine. We were following Caldor and Rina. So Caldor is one of the brothers, so he's brother to the other 2 heroes from the other 2 books in this series, and Rina is a housekeeper, so she is one of the housekeepers in his sort of big estate, his big castle, whatever we want to call it. Now, ever since Rina has been one of his housekeepers, she's had a secret crush on Caldor. She really likes him, and you know, dreams about the day that he's going to finally notice her and they can be together. Meanwhile, Caldor has no idea that she is actually his fated mate, but since she has moved into the castle, he has become insatiable when it comes to sex, and so he has been trying to scratch his itch with as many women as possible, and nothing is working, and it's absolutely driving him mad. What he doesn't know is that Rina is his fated mate. She's actually his blood mate, because his species is sort of part vampire and they kind of live off blood, and they have a blood mate, and she is his. And so when he finally figures out why he's been so feral this whole time, and it's actually because of her, he then decides that he's going to entice her into a sex deal with him. Really, it's a blood deal, because he sort of says to her, you know, I want exclusive rights to drink your blood, and it may become sexual. And she obviously agrees, because she's secretly been waiting for him to notice her all this time. But Caldor is keeping things from her because he knows that she's his blood mate. He really should tell her, but he decides to keep it from her, mainly because he doesn't want any emotional entanglements. He really doesn't want anyone to know that she's his blood mate, and he doesn't want to fall in love with her because he very much sees that as a weakness. And so he's kind of lying to her, but also to himself as well. Of course, he's going to push it too far, mistreat her enough that she's going to decide that she's going to leave. And it's only then that he's going to realise the error of his ways. And so now he's going to have to go after her, try and find her, track her down. And when he brings her back, he's going to have to do an awful lot of grovelling in order to get her to forgive him and for them to finally get their HEA. Now, as always, I think Zoey Draven is such a beautiful writer. She really gets the depth of emotion, and she's so good at writing these kind of characters that really pine for each other, that really long for each other, and it really felt like these two were really in love, and so it was a high payoff when they finally got together. So overall, I rated this one 5 stars, and it was 3.5 on the Spice scale. Next up, I picked up Learn Your Lesson by Kandi Steiner. This is book 3 in the Kings of the Ice series. I did actually read this as an arc. It's an ice hockey romance. It's also a nanny romance between Will and Chloe. So in addition to being ice hockey and a nanny romance, it's also close proximity. We're dealing with a damaged hero, grumpy sunshine. They end up being housemates, enter into a sex deal, so there's some sex education in here as well. Will is a single parent, and obviously because she's his nanny, then it's also a workplace romance as well. Now, Will is the goalie for the Tampa Bay Ospreys, and Chloe is actually a kindergarten teacher. Now, like I said, Will is a single parent. He had a wife, but she unfortunately passed away, and so he now has a daughter, and he's been really struggling to get himself a nanny. So much so that on one particular day, his nanny doesn't turn up to pick his daughter up from school, and so the kindergarten teacher, Chloe, actually makes sure that she gets home. And of course, Will is really grateful to Chloe for making sure that his daughter is safe and home, and he kind of reveals to her that he's been having a lot of trouble finding a nanny that's either suitable, reliable enough, or isn't just trying to enter into a relationship with Will. And so Chloe offers to be this little girl's nanny, because what we learn about Chloe is she's quite young. She absolutely loves her job, but she doesn't have very many friends, and so she's desperate for something to do outside of the school hours to kind of fill up her time. She absolutely loves children, and so she volunteers, like I say, to be Chloe's nanny. And so Will agrees, and Chloe starts to get really close to Will's daughter, and Will really enjoys having her around, and he's really grateful for what she's doing, and she's making a great nanny. And so it makes sense that she ends up living with him. He's got a pool house where she can move into, because he needs a living nanny, because obviously he's traveling a lot with his work. He works unpredictable hours, so he needs her to be there when he can't be, to, you know, get his daughter up in the morning, take her to school, fetch her from school, do all of the after school clubs, that sort of thing. And so Chloe moves in with him essentially, and his daughter, and just becomes completely indispensable to Will. She does stuff around the house, she cooks dinner when she needs to, and she is absolutely devoted to his daughter. And of course, Will sees this and starts to get very attracted to Chloe, and very interested in a relationship with Chloe, but he's been hurt before. Obviously he's a widow, he is really scared to enter into a relationship again, and so he thinks that he's going to be able to keep her at arm's length if he invites her into a sex deal with him, because he says, hey, I really fancy you, I think we can make it work if we just, you know, are friends with benefits, as long as you don't expect anything from me from an emotional perspective. And she says yes, absolutely, because she's only previously had one sexual experience, and so she says to him, it'll be great actually if you can teach me about some of the things I don't know, and that will help me out for the future, right? So it's one of these kind of sex deal arrangements as well, with some sex education thrown in. Of course, once they start having sex with each other, Will is not going to help but be emotionally attached to Chloe, and so this is going to make things a little bit more complicated. Now, I did enjoy this one, but it wasn't my favourite Kandi Steiner. I have read better from her, and overall I rated this one 4 stars and rated it 3.5 on the Spy scale. Next up, I read Destroy Me by Michelle Hurd. This is book 1 in her Corrupted Royal series. It's a mafia romance between the Bratva and the Italian. Our hero in this one was an enforcer, Misha, and then Aurora is a mafia princess. And of course, these two are enemies. They're part of rival families. And so this is a kind of a Romeo and Juliet style of romance, I would say. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Samantha Cook and Duncan Cole. And overall, I rated this one 3.5 stars, and it was 3 on the Spy scale. So this is a pretty on the shortish side. It was less than 300 pages, and this was centered around Monarch Academy, which is kind of a mafia school that Michelle Hurd has got. So there's a whole series around this, but we've seen this Monarch Academy in some other books as well. So this is close proximity, like I say, enemies to lovers, forbidden romance, possessive hero. There is a bit of a time jump in here. There's toucher and die vibes, and a virgin heroine. Right at the start of this book, Aurora and Misha are both out on the town, and they both end up at the same nightclub. Aurora has gone out with her friends. In fact, she snuck out of the house because she just wants to have fun. Her parents wouldn't approve, but she kind of wants to get out of the house. And Misha and his friends have just started at the Monarch Academy. They're kind of in enforcer training, if you like, and they've kind of just gone to this nightclub. Now, while they're there, there's a hit on the nightclub and there's a bomb explosion, and Misha ends up rescuing Aurora. In fact, he kind of like covers her with his body to protect her from the rubble, and they ended up getting trapped in the rubble for several hours until they are rescued. And while they were trapped in the rubble, they end up talking to each other, sharing secrets with each other, and kind of forming this bond. And after they are rescued, it's only then that Misha realises who Aurora is, that she's actually part of an Italian family who's rivals with his, and then he realises that they can't ever see each other again. Meanwhile, Aurora has no idea who Misha is. No one ever tells her that he's part of this Russian family that's rivals with hers, and so she just holds on to this memory of him like he's her knight in shining armour, someone who very much saved her, and she's distraught that she never knew who he really was and has not been able to find him and has never seen him since. Jump then 2 years. I said there was a time jump, but we jumped 2 years, and then suddenly Aurora is now going with her friend to the Monarch Academy to spend 4 years there. And who should she run into while she's there but Misha, because now he's just started his 3rd year. They've already done 2 years there, and so she finally realises who he is, that they're part of a rival family, and instantly there's animosity between them. Misha does try to make her life quite miserable, but of course they are still very attracted to each other. They both still have feelings for each other, and Misha isn't going to be able to hide his feelings for her for too long. But they are rival families, and so while they're on sacred ground at Monarch Academy, they can't do anything to each other. No one can do anything to them, but they're going to be in serious trouble when people find out that they are in fact together. So Misha has to figure out a way that he's going to make this work out in the end. Next up, I picked up Disclaim by Pam Godwin. This is book 3 in her Deliver series. This is a dark romance, and surprisingly this was also a mafia like cartel romance set in Colombia. We were following Camilla and Matthias. This is a captive situation, damaged hero, forced proximity, obsessed hero, lots of PTSD. It's a second chance romance for these two. Also a bit of stalking going on, and an undercover situation. So had I actually picked this up and read it from the Mafia Romance Readathon, unknowingly I wouldn't have picked this one up because I didn't think it was a Mafia Romance, but this one would have actually scored me quite a lot of points had I read it for the Mafia Romance Readathon. But you live and learn, right? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but definitely one I'll be recommending for next time if anyone wants to score quite a few points. So the Deliver series is essentially about sex trafficking. That is ultimately what this series is about. Now our heroine in this one, Camilla, she is a kind of a survivor of a sex trafficking situation because she was actually captured and she was trained by Van, and he's a hero from book 2. So she was actually kidnapped by Liv and Van, trained by Van, held captive by him for a year, and then she was able to escape. And Camilla, ever since then, has been heading up this group of vigilantes, all people that have survived sex trafficking situations, and they are kind of like now, like I say, vigilantes trying to bring sex trafficking rings down, kill the baddies, rescue the victims. And at the start of this book, Camilla is hot on the trail of this particular sex trafficking ring, but she's really struggling to find out exactly where they're located. She's really struggling to cut the head off the snake, as it were. And so she decides that she's going to go undercover. She's deliberately going to get herself captured so that she can go into the enemy camp, if you like, and therefore expose it. Now her friends aren't too happy about her doing this, but she's absolutely adamant. And so in order to make sure that they know exactly where she's gone, she puts a tracker in her tooth so that they can track her and then they can ultimately come and rescue her. Now Matthias, who is our hero in this one, he actually knew Camilla when she was a girl before she was originally captured, and they were actually childhood sweethearts. They were in love with each other, they were going to be each other's firsts, and they were very much in love. But when she was 16 and he was 18, he was taken captive by the cartel and taken somewhere, and she kind of waited for him to come back, but he never came back. And in the meantime she was taken, obviously, and ended up where she's ended up. And so imagine her surprise, but also her anger, when she finally kind of like hands herself in to this sex trafficking ring. It's Matthias who has actually picked her up, takes him back to his compound in Colombia, and discovers that he is now head of the cartel and seemingly a sex trafficker himself. And so this book is a second chance romance for this couple. And obviously there's a lot to unpick here, because Camilla has been a victim of sex trafficking, and now the person that she was in love with as a teenager seemingly is the head of a sex trafficking ring. Not only that, but head of the cartel as well. So like I said, there's a lot to discover here, a lot to unpick, and as you can imagine with a Pam Godwin, things are not as they seem. There's much more depth to these characters and this story than originally we think, and we start to, you know, gather more clues as we go along and discover more until we figure out exactly what's going on. So I enjoy this one. Obviously it was a Pam Godwin, so it was really well written. I didn't think it was as good as books 1 or 2 in the series, but still a very good dark romance. I rated it 4 stars, and it was 4 on the spy scale. This one was quite heavy on the BDSM, and our hero did inflict quite a lot of pain on our heroine as well, so just be aware of that going in. Finally then, I picked up Wicked Savage by Lilian Harris. This is book 4 in her Savage King series, book 4 and the final book of this series. This is another mafia romance, and it's the final book in the Irish family story, so we're following Killian, and also then the heroine was Dinara, who we find out is linked to the Russian mafia. So this is also another enemies to lovers situation, age gap, arranged marriage, obsessed hero, sex clubs involved, there's some stalking, there's a time jump, and touch her and die vibes as well. Now I'm part of Lilian Harris's ARC team, so I picked this one up as an ARC. It's actually due out on the 8th of May, and I have to say, I'm going to get it out there straight away, that this was not my favourite of Lilian Harris's, certainly not my favourite in the series. I gave it a very generous 3.5 stars because it was an ARC, so I could round it up to a 4. This book is really in 2 halves. The first half of this book, we are watching as Dinara and Killian fall in love, because they actually meet each other at Constantine's sex club. She's gone there with friends to have some fun when she's just turned 18, and Killian is there with his brothers, and they have this amazing night together, and in fact he takes her virginity. But like I say, they have this instant connection, instant rapport, instant attraction, and things go from there. And over the next few weeks, he courts her, they go out on dates, and everything is seemingly okay. Now, what we actually discover is that Dinara is Constantine's niece, and Constantine is head of the Bratva, and we've seen him in the other books, not only in this series but the one before that as well. He actually owns the sex club, but we know that the Bratva and the Irish mafia family are at odds with each other. The Irish in particular really hate Constantine's family because it was his uncle, I believe, that murdered the mother of the Irish family. So the Irish family absolutely hate the Bratva, they absolutely blame them for what happened to their mother, and as a result they are mortal enemies. Now Constantine really wants to do a deal with the Irish, right? He kind of like wants to form an alliance between them, so he's been angling for an arranged marriage between their families for some time. So when Constantine realises what's going on and that Dinara is dating Killian, he's delighted because he thinks this is great. If Killian falls in love with her, they'll get married and now our families are united. But of course what actually happens is that Killian eventually finds out that Dinara is part of the Russian family, and he breaks it off with Dinara because he's like, I cannot in good conscience go out with my mortal enemy. And even though he is kind of in love with her, he basically breaks it off with her and breaks Dinara's heart, and he's absolutely adamant they can't be together. However, Killian can't stay away from Dinara because he's obsessed with her, and so even though he keeps breaking her heart and says they can't be together, he can't help but interfere if she's trying to see someone else, and kind of forces situations where they are in close proximity with one another, until finally Dinara can't take it anymore, and she goes to her uncle Constantine and asks for help and says, please can you send me away because I need to get away from Killian. He keeps, you know, tormenting me basically, and I need to get away. And so she disappears then. Constantine sends her somewhere, we don't know where she's gone, she disappears for a couple of years, and then there's a time jump when she comes back, and this is really part 2 of the book. Obviously then when she comes back, this is their chance then to be together, because Killian has realised in their time apart that he really does care for her, and now he's got some grovelling to do in order to win her over. However, this is the main reason why I really didn't get on with this book at all, because I felt like the first 50% was too much of a wedge where they're just falling in love. Right, we see them, we're falling in love, and I think Lilian Harris wrote it like that, so that we were really invested in them, and then when they break up it's really heartbreaking, so we're really invested, we want to see them get back together. But for me, this part of the book went on for too long, because we know they're going to break up, right? It's the premise of the story, and that he's going to have some grovelling to do, and I think 50% was too big of a chunk for that. Plus, Killian really frustrated me, because he was one of those people that was, I am in love with this heroine, I'm obsessed with this heroine, but I can't be with this heroine. And then he just went on to make her life a misery because he couldn't have her, he didn't want to be with her, but he wouldn't allow her to be with anyone else either. And so Killian really frustrated me, and I just wanted him to make a decision. Either let her go and let her get on with her life and just forget about it, or just step up, be a man, and go out with her. Because even at this point his family was saying to him, why are you still holding a grudge? Mum wouldn't have wanted you to be unhappy, clearly you love her, so, you know, just get on with it. So his own family were giving him permission to be with her, but he was stubbornly holding on to say, no, we can't be together, she's our mortal enemy. So that really frustrated me. And even when then Dinara came back and the events that unfolded weren't enough to win me back over to Killian or to forgive him really for how he treated her in the first half of this book. In addition to that, I wasn't a big fan of the time jumps, because once they were then split up, Lilian Harris tends to do this thing where it was like 3 months later, 6 months later, 2 years later, another 6 months later, and so then we have this middle section that is lots and lots of time jumps before we get finally up to present day, and they kind of can, you know, wrap up the story. And then finally, the other thing that Lilian Harris always does is writes a big twist at the end, and usually the big twist at the end, this big reveal at the end, is often ridiculous. Sometimes it's like the little old lady next door that just sits on her doorstep and knits. We never suspect her of anything, ends up being this, you know, underworld kingpin, or other ridiculous twists of that nature. And this book also had a twist at the end in terms of who the villain was, and I wasn't too happy with how that particular storyline resolved itself. But that said, I have really enjoyed the series up to this point, and the next series that she's going to be bringing out is the Bratva series, and the first book I believe is going to be Constantine's story, and I'm really excited to read his story because, like I say, he's a character that's been showing up in quite a lot of other books, in quite a few of the other series, and I'm very, very intrigued by him and can't wait for him to fall in love. Okay, there we go. This is going to be a very long video, but hopefully I'll be able to edit it down to a sensible length. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and all that's left for me to do is say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. So I'll tell you, and we start to, you know, gather the clues, unravel the pieces. Okay, 4 more to go. This is the Swords